race comes from. That's interesting because the North Country is exactly where the prophet Jeremiah described that the invasion was going to come from in the last days. Jeremiah chapter 6 verse 22, "Thus saith the Lord, Behold, a people cometh forth from the North Country." In their concept, that would be Toul. "And a great nation shall be raised from the sides of the earth." Now, the Toul Society was a secret society, and they used to meet and they used to have these seances, and they were telling people that they were in contact with extraterrestrials or alien entities of some kind that were giving them illumination as to how to bring about a new order. The inspiration behind Adolf Hitler was the Toul Society. In fact, Adolf Hitler, in his demon-possessed mind, had this concept of what he called the 1,000-year Reich, or literally the 1,000-year reign. This, of course, is a mockery of the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. There's also evidence to believe, and I don't know if I believe it totally or not, that the Toul Society was receiving ideas from these ETs, or these devil spirits, or these familiar spirits, on how to build, and we do know for a fact that Adolf Hitler was involved in this, building saucer-shaped craft. Now, an interesting side note to all this is that when Hitler lost the war, the American government, through the CIA, started an operation called Operation Paperclip. And Operation Paperclip was designed to bring all the German scientists that were working on all this rocket technology and some of these other things, the atomic bomb, and transfer them to the deserts of New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada, and have them work on projects for us. This is documented and well known. But anyway, let's get back to the Toul Society. The Toul Society was receiving all this illumination. They were the basis behind the reign, or the 1,000-year Reich, or as Hitler called it himself, the New Order of global domination. Interestingly enough, you know the symbol for Adolf Hitler, don't you? The symbol for the Nazi Party? It's the swastika. We saw that in our last two videos. The swastika, the X, the cross, being a picture of the human chromosome. Albert Pike, who also was part of these prophets of the New Order, the grandfather of Freemasonry, writing this huge volume called Morals and Dogma, by inspiration of these familiar spirits, is putting this swastika symbol inside of his book Morals and Dogma, calling it a symbol for immortality. The swastika shows the idea of the fusion of opposites, things pointing in opposite directions inside the human chromosome. We saw the swastika symbols in our last video inside the Masonic House of the Temple Lodge in Washington, D.C. Here it is on the pavement of an ancient temple. You see the swastika, you see the yin-yang symbol, you see the symbol for DNA, you see the fusion of things that are opposite together. This was what all the pagan mystery religions were all about. And they were all receiving, this is why all these groups use the same symbols and the same concepts, is that they're receiving their divination and their illumination by the same God, by the same familiar spirit that's part of the conspiracy to bring about a new world order in the last days. Then after Blavatsky, we have a woman by the name of Alice Bailey, who was actually a disciple and a follower of Madame Blavatsky. She was in direct contact with a demon or a devil, a familiar spirit that she called Djwal Khul. Here's an image of this guy. He's a familiar spirit. He's one of these ascended masters of the New Age. In fact, Alice Bailey had this idea that mankind was about ready to enter into a phase of initiation that would bring mankind into a new age or a new level of enlightenment, bringing man to godhood. And she received all this by way of inspiration of this familiar spirit. She also happened to be the founder of a publishing company that she originally called the Lucifer Publishing Company. Well, that ought to tell you something there. But it's since been changed to the Lucis Trust. Now, there's all kinds of connections. You can Google this and find a connection between the Lucis Trust and the United Nations. I mean, she receives the inspiration from Blavatsky and her familiar spirit, Djwal Khul. She then writes all these books. It's being spread out all over the world. The United Nations involved in it. And here is what she said in her book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy. She said, "There is no question that the work to be done in familiarizing the general public with the nature of the mysteries is of paramount importance. So here's what she meant by that. You go back to the days of John Dee and Francis Bacon and these guys, and these guys are the only ones who know some of this stuff. As time goes on, and especially in the days that we're living in now, mankind is becoming more and more and more familiar with the work, the nature, the secret of the mysteries. We're being flooded in our minds with ideas and concepts and music and art and TV shows and films and books. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But the work to familiarize everybody with the teachings of the mystery religion is ongoing and will eventually result in the establishment of a new world order. Now, there's a guy I want to throw in here after Blavatsky, after you have Elise Bailey, you have some of these others that have come along the scene. We talked about Albert Pike a while ago, Manly Hall, who wrote The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Some of these people are just working in various areas. Manly Hall and Pike working amongst Freemasonry, secret societies. Elise Bailey working through the New Age movement. Crowley working literally everywhere. So you have all these disciples spreading out and spreading their false gospel everywhere, and getting people in contact with familiar spirits. Now, if you read any New Age literature, they will tell you that there's two really good ways to come in contact with an enlightened master to open your mind up. One of the ways is through transcendental meditation or certain rituals. Transcendental meditation has now crept into the Christian church in the form of contemplative prayer, or what's called Ignatian contemplation. That is a whole other video that we have. But anyway, you can either do it through transcendental meditation, closing down your mind, opening it up so these demons can jump in you and give you this illumination. There is, however, another way. The Indians used to do it. Certain other groups used to do it. In fact, the whole concept behind magical potions that witches or warlocks used to put together was to open up the mind to give you illumination. I read a book a couple years ago in doing research about DNA from a guy who used to work for pharmaceutical companies. He would go down to Brazil in the Amazon rainforest, and he would talk to the shamans down there, the witch doctors, the voodoo guys. He would talk to them about what it was and what trees and plants that they could use and concoct together to cure certain human ailments. Ibuprofen was one of those ideas. A pharmaceutical company found out from a local tribe how to mix this potion and that tree and that herb together to make this anti-inflammatory called ibuprofen. But anyway, this guy said that he would contact these witch doctors down there, these priests of this magic that they had down there. These priests would mix a concoction. Now this is interesting. They would mix up massive amounts of tobacco into a drink. They would drink it, and it would throw them into a trance. They would then contact the spirit of this tree, or the spirit of the woods, or the spirit of this and that and the other. And these spirits would teach them how to mix things together to make medicines. I kid you not. This is what's going on. And so anyway, there's two ways. You can either do transcendental meditation, or you can mix together some sort of potion to expand your mind and open it up. So now we jump to the 1950s. A thing called LSD has been invented. Where did they get the formula for that? Anyway, LSD is a mind-expanding drug. I've never taken it. I talked to a pastor who used to do LSD. I said, what's it like on that? He said, everything, he said, it just makes sense. The whole world just makes sense. And he said a lot of these songs that you hear on the radio, like these rock songs, these acid rock songs, you listen to the lyrics and they don't make any sense. It's because you've never been on acid. If you get on LSD and you're tripping out, all of a sudden these lyrics make a lot of sense. And you get visions and you get things that you think are real. Well, now we're in the 1950s. A guy by the name of Francis Crick. He's working with a guy by the name of Watson, and they're working together to discover the source of life inside of our cells, the structure of DNA. Crick admitted that at that time he was taking small doses of LSD in order to free his mind so that he could conceptualize what amounts to the exact same thing that all of these other mystics all throughout history have been conceptualizing, and that is the nature and the makeup of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, the book of life. LSD was the basis of a guy by the name of Timothy Leary. You remember him? He's one of these beatniks of the 60s. He's the one who's telling everybody, turn on, tune in, and drop out. Drop out of school, drop out of the military, drop out of society altogether, and take a lot of drugs and have a lot of sex. He was the leader of the counterculture movement in this country. His influence extends way beyond just the beatniks and the hippies of the 60s. And you have to remember, all of these hippies that grew up in the 60s, these are guys now running pharmaceutical companies. They're sitting as governors and mayors and congressmen and presidents. These are the people that are now running the show, and they all got inspiration through the suggestion of Timothy Leary and the opening up of their mind through LSD. These people have been in contact with the same familiar spirits that all of these other prophets of the New Order. We look at people like Marilyn Ferguson. Marilyn Ferguson, a New Ager, in 1980 wrote a book called The Aquarian Conspiracy. Check out the logo of her book. It's a symbol for 3-strand DNA. Marilyn Ferguson comes under fire by the New Age movement because they say she reveals too much. But remember, Elise Bailey said, it's time. It's time to let everybody know what we're doing. It's time to familiarize everybody with the nature of the mysteries. People have to know where we're headed in a veiled sort of way. So Marilyn Ferguson writes this book called The Aquarian Conspiracy, and she basically says, we're the New Agers. We're going to bring in a new age of peace and enlightenment, turn men into gods, and it's all about a paradigm shift and all of these things. And by the way, our agents are in governments, they're in business, they're running marketing programs, they're running banks, they're running commerce all over the world, they're communists, they're Democrats, they're Republicans. There are ministers and school teachers, there are people in the media, there are Hollywood people. She says we have our people everywhere. So what started out historically as one guy here, one guy here, one guy here, now we have exploded to varying degrees all throughout society. And now we have a man by the name of Dan Brown. Now remember, we're talking about spreading the gospel of the New World Order in the last days. We're talking about how important it is to familiarize everybody with these concepts, to get them to visualize. This is why you see so many symbols and logos that are sort of changing into these new paradigms or these new ideas. This is why new ideas are being introduced into Christian theology or into the church. This is why the Barack Obama wants to change America, to introduce a new paradigm. This is why people all over the world in the New Age movement and in the church and in politics and in business are all bringing about what they call a paradigm shift. And they have to familiarize people and get these concepts in people's minds to bring about this paradigm shift that's going to take place on planet Earth. So in steps Dan Brown. Now Dan Brown writes a couple books, and nobody, not too many people pick them up. He writes Angels and Demons, and it's fairly interesting. But in Angels and Demons, he's introducing concepts and ideas that most people had never thought of. He is legitimizing things that some people say, oh, only conspiracy theorists believe in this. Dan Brown talks about in Angels and Demons a group called the Illuminati. The people who are the illuminated scientists who are going to bring about a new age or a new world order. Still not too many people are paying attention to Dan Brown's book. But all of a sudden, he writes the Da Vinci Code, and for some reason, everybody in the world's picking up. I mean, this book is being printed all over the world. It's being translated into languages. And all of a sudden, his concepts and his ideas, which I firmly believe that he believes with all of his heart, his concepts and his ideas and the introduction to certain ideas and principles is now being made known all over the world. People who at best might have been marginal Christians or had this Christian concept that Jesus